Amelia thinks she's going to work at NASA. Isn't that adorable? The woman can't figure out how to program the DVR, but she's going to send rockets to Mars. My husband Bradley said those words to a table of 8 guests at our dinner party, his face flushed with wine and the pleasure of his own joke, while our friends erupted in laughter that echoed off the walls of the house I had helped him buy, in the life I had helped him build, at the expense of every dream I had ever dared to have. What Bradley didn't know was that the woman he had just humiliated had a master's degree in aerospace engineering, had been secretly working on propulsion systems for 3 years, and had just received a call back from NASA's Jet Propulsion Laboratory, and that in 7 years, she would be standing in mission control directing humanity's first crewed landing on Mars while he watched from his living room, realizing too late that the adorable dream he mocked had become history. My name is Dr. Amelia Cross, and this is the story of how I went from a punchline at a dinner party to the woman who put humans on another planet. I need to take you back to the beginning. To a childhood spent staring at the stars and believing I could touch them. I grew up in rural New Mexico, in a small town called Magdalena, population 938. My father was a ranch hand, my mother a school secretary, and neither of them had gone to college. But they had given me something more valuable than any degree, the belief that intelligence wasn't determined by where you came from. My father would take me out to the desert at night, away from the town's meager lights, and we would lie on blankets looking up at a sky so full of stars it seemed impossible they could all fit. "You know what I see up there, Mija?" he would ask. "What?" "I see possibilities. Every one of those stars is a sun, with maybe planets around it, with maybe people looking back at us right now, wondering the same things we're wondering." He would squeeze my hand. "The universe is big, Amelia. Too big for small dreams." I was 8 years old when I decided I would work for NASA. I was 9 when I built my first model rocket from a kit I saved 6 months of allowance to buy. I was 14 when I won the state science fair with a project on orbital mechanics. I was 17 when I graduated valedictorian of my high school and received a full scholarship to MIT. My parents cried at my graduation. Not from sadness, from the overwhelming joy of watching their daughter achieve something they had never dared to imagine for themselves. "We always knew you were special," my mother said, holding me tight. "Now the whole world is going to know it too." I believed her. I believed in myself. I believed that hard work and intelligence and passion could overcome any obstacle. Then I met Bradley Montgomery. Bradley was a business major at Harvard, which he mentioned within the first 5 minutes of every conversation. He was charming in the way that wealthy, confident men often are, not because of genuine warmth, but because he had never experienced a world that didn't bend to accommodate him. We met at a mixer between MIT and Harvard students. He saw me across the room and decided he wanted me, which was flattering at 21, before I understood that being wanted wasn't the same as being valued. "An aerospace engineer," he said when I told him my major. "That's impressive. Most girls I know are studying communications or art history." I should have heard the condescension in that statement. I didn't. I heard what I wanted to hear, that he was impressed. We dated through the rest of college. He was attentive, generous, always ready with compliments that made me feel seen. He came to my thesis defense and sat in the front row, beaming with what I interpreted as pride. What I didn't realize was that Bradley didn't see my intelligence as an asset. He saw it as a challenge, something to be diminished until I fit more comfortably into the role he had envisioned for his future wife. We got married 3 months after graduation. The erosion was gradual. So gradual that I didn't notice it happening until I was already buried. Bradley got a job at his father's investment firm in Connecticut. I had offers from Boeing, Lockheed Martin, NASA's Goddard Space Flight Center. Bradley convinced me to turn them all down. "We need to be together," he said reasonably. "Long distance doesn't work for marriages. You can find something in Connecticut. Maybe teach at a community college. Use that big brain of yours to inspire the next generation." So I did. I took a job teaching physics at a community college, telling myself it was temporary, that I would find my way back to aerospace eventually, but eventually never came. Every time I mentioned applying for an engineering position, Bradley had a reason why the timing wasn't right. We were trying to buy a house. He was up for a promotion. We should think about starting a family soon. Besides, he would add casually, those jobs are so competitive. You've been out of the field for years now. Maybe it's better to be realistic about your options. Realistic. That word became a cage. Every dream I expressed was met with, be realistic. Every aspiration was gently redirected towards something smaller, something that wouldn't threaten the life Bradley had designed. I stopped talking about NASA. I stopped talking about rockets and propulsion systems and the Mars missions I followed obsessively online. I became what Bradley wanted, a supportive wife, a competent hostess, a woman who smiled at dinner parties and laughed at his jokes and never reminded anyone that she had once been valedictorian, once won scholarships, once dreamed of touching the stars. But I never stopped working. In secret, in the hours when Bradley was at the office or golfing with clients, I studied. I kept up with academic journals. I developed theoretical models for improved ion propulsion systems. I published papers under my maiden name, Cross, not Montgomery, in journals Bradley never read. When I finally applied to NASA's Jet Propulsion Laboratory, I had been preparing for 8 years. My application included publications, theoretical frameworks, and a propulsion concept that the review committee later told me was decades ahead of current thinking. The callback came on a Tuesday afternoon. Dr. Cross, this is the Jet Propulsion Laboratory. We were very impressed with your application. We'd like to invite you for an interview. I hung up the phone and cried for 20 minutes. Then I dried my eyes and started planning how to tell Bradley. I chose the wrong moment. Or maybe there was never going to be a right moment. Bradley had invited colleagues for dinner, other investment bankers and their wives, people who measured success in portfolio returns and square footage. I had spent the day cooking an elaborate meal, playing the role I had been assigned. Halfway through dinner, emboldened by wine and genuine excitement, I mentioned the news. I heard back from NASA today. They want to interview me for a position at JPL. The table went quiet. Bradley's face shifted through several emotions: surprise, confusion, and then something darker. NASA? His friend Greg laughed nervously. Really? The Jet Propulsion Laboratory, I confirmed. They develop spacecraft and manage missions. Mars rovers, deep space probes. Amelia thinks she's going to work at NASA, Bradley interrupted, his voice taking on the tone he used when telling jokes at my expense. Isn't that adorable? The woman can't figure out how to program the DVR, but she's going to send rockets to Mars. Everyone laughed. Even the wives, who should have known better, who probably had their own dreams buried somewhere beneath the expectations of their husbands. I sat very still. I felt something inside me crystallize, not break, but harden into diamond. I have a master's degree in aerospace engineering from MIT, I said quietly. I graduated summa cum laude. I've published 12 papers on propulsion systems in peer-reviewed journals. And I deliberately struggle with the DVR because you got angry the one time I programmed it correctly and you felt stupid for not knowing how. The silence that followed was absolute. Bradley's face went red. Amelia, you're embarrassing yourself. No, Bradley. You've been embarrassing me for 8 years. I've just been too afraid to notice. I stood up, my napkin falling to the floor. Excuse me. I need some air. I walked out of the dining room, out of the house, into the cool Connecticut night. I stood in the driveway of the home I had helped pay for, looking up at stars dimmed by light pollution, and I made a decision. I was done being realistic. The divorce was finalized 3 months later. Bradley was genuinely shocked. He couldn't understand why I was leaving. Hadn't he provided for me? Hadn't he given me a beautiful home, financial security, a comfortable life? You're throwing everything away for a fantasy, he said during one of our final conversations. NASA isn't going to hire a community college teacher. You're 40 years old. You're past your prime. Be realistic, Amelia. I've been realistic for 8 years, I replied. Look where it got me. I moved to California with 2 suitcases and a decade of suppressed ambition. The JPL interview went better than I could have hoped. My publications had caught the attention of the propulsion team, and my theoretical work on ion engines was exactly what they needed for a project they were developing. They offered me a position as a propulsion engineer. I accepted before they finished the sentence. The first year was humbling. I was surrounded by people who had never stopped working in the field, who had continuous experience I lacked. I stayed late every night, arrived early every morning, asked questions until my colleagues probably wanted to strangle me, but I learned. God, did I learn. I soaked up knowledge like parched earth absorbing rain. By year 2, I was leading a small team. By year 3, I was deputy project manager for an unmanned Mars mission. By year 5, I was being considered for the most ambitious project in NASA's history, Prometheus, the first crewed mission to Mars. The selection process for mission director was grueling. Candidates were evaluated on technical expertise, leadership ability, crisis management, communication skills. We underwent psychological assessments, physical evaluations, simulated emergency scenarios. When the administrator called me into his office on a gray February morning, I prepared myself for disappointment. I was a late entry to the field, a woman in a male-dominated industry, someone who had spent 8 years teaching physics instead of building spacecraft. Dr. Cross, the administrator said, "We've made our decision. We'd like you to lead the Prometheus mission." I didn't cry. I had done enough crying over Bradley Montgomery. Instead, I smiled, shook his hand, and said, "When do we start?" The mission preparation took 2 years. 2 years of selecting crew members, testing systems, running simulations, preparing for every possible contingency. 2 years of press conferences and congressional hearings and budget negotiations. 2 years of carrying the weight of humanity's greatest exploration on my shoulders. I thought about my father often during those years. He had died 3 years after my divorce, peacefully in his sleep, having lived just long enough to see me join NASA. At his funeral, my mother had given me a letter he had written when he first got sick. "Mija, I always knew you would reach the stars. Not because you're smarter than everyone else, though you are. Not because you work harder, though you do. But because you never stopped looking up, even when everyone told you to look down. Your husband tried to make you small. The world will try to make you small. Don't let them. You were born for big things. I'll be watching from wherever I end up. When you land on Mars, wave at the sky. I'll wave back. Te amo, Mija. Papa." I kept that letter in my desk at Mission Control. On the hard days, and there were many hard days, I would read it and remember why I was there. Launch day arrived on a Tuesday in September. The whole world was watching. 3 billion people, according to the networks, tuned in to see the Prometheus spacecraft lift off from Kennedy Space Center. I stood in Mission Control at JPL, surrounded by my team, watching the countdown. 10, 9, 8. I thought about Bradley and his dinner party. I thought about the laughter, the humiliation, the years of being told to be realistic. 7, 6, 5. I thought about my father in the desert, pointing at the stars, telling me the universe was too big for small dreams. 4, 3, 2, 1. Ignition. The rocket rose on a pillar of fire, carrying 6 astronauts toward a destination no human had ever reached. I watched the telemetry, calling out checkpoints, managing the 1,000 small crises that inevitably arose. When the spacecraft achieved orbit and separated from the booster, Mission Control erupted in cheers. But we weren't done. We were just beginning. The journey took 7 months. 7 months of monitoring systems, adjusting trajectories, managing crew psychology across 140 million miles of empty space. 7 months of press briefings and public updates, and the constant awareness that the slightest miscalculation could mean 6 lives lost. I barely slept. I ate meals at my console. I developed a personal relationship with the coffee machine that probably qualified as concerning, but I also experienced joy unlike anything I had ever known. Every successful maneuver, every milestone reached, every day closer to Mars, each one was vindication. Each one was proof that the woman who couldn't program the DVR was capable of guiding humans to another world. Landing day was scheduled for April 15th. The descent would take 7 minutes. 7 minutes of communication delay that meant I couldn't control anything in real time, couldn't make adjustments, couldn't help if something went wrong. 7 minutes that the team had privately dubbed 7 minutes of terror. I stood at my console, watching the telemetry, listening to the delayed communications from the crew. "Prometheus, this is Mission Control. You are go for landing sequence initiation. The response came 4 minutes later, the time it took for signals to cross the void between our worlds. Mission Control, Prometheus. Initiating landing sequence. See you on the other side. I watched the data streams. Retro rockets firing. Heat shield deployment. Parachute release. Every number had to be perfect. Every system had to perform exactly as designed. The screen showed the spacecraft descending through the thin Martian atmosphere. The room was silent except for the hum of computers and the pounding of my own heart. Then, finally, the message we had all been waiting for. Mission Control, this is Prometheus. We have touchdown. Repeat, we have touchdown on Mars. The room exploded. People were crying, hugging, screaming with joy. I stood at my console, tears streaming down my face, thinking about a little girl in New Mexico who had looked up at the stars and dared to dream we had done it. Humanity had reached Mars, and I had led them there. The news coverage was overwhelming. Every network, every channel, every website ran the story. My face was everywhere, press conferences, interviews, magazine covers. The woman who had directed the Mars mission, who had made history, who had achieved what countless others had only dreamed of. I didn't watch most of it. I was too busy managing the surface operations, coordinating the science experiments, ensuring our astronauts had everything they needed on a planet 140 million miles from home. But I heard about Bradley. My mother called me a week after the landing, barely able to contain herself. Mija, you'll never believe this. My neighbor's daughter works with Bradley's new wife. She said he was watching the landing on TV, and when you came on screen, he just sat there frozen. His wife asked, "Isn't that your ex?" And he didn't say a word. Just got up and left the room. I felt nothing. No satisfaction, no vindication, no desire to gloat. Bradley Montgomery had been a chapter in my life, a painful one, but a chapter that was long since closed. His opinion of me no longer mattered. What mattered was the science we were conducting on Mars. What mattered was the data streaming back from another world. What mattered was the little girl somewhere in New Mexico or Texas or India or Kenya who was watching the news and thinking, I could do that someday. 3 months after the landing, I received a letter. It was handwritten on expensive stationery with a return address in Connecticut. I almost threw it away unopened. But curiosity won. Amelia, I watched you on television. I saw what you accomplished. I want to say I'm proud, but I know I have no right to that feeling. I was wrong about you. Not just wrong, cruel, diminishing, afraid of your potential in ways I didn't understand until you were gone. I told you to be realistic because I was terrified of what you might become if you dreamed. You were always smarter than me. I knew that from the moment we met. And instead of celebrating it, I tried to bury it because your brightness made me feel dim. I'm not writing to ask for forgiveness. I'm writing to say that you were right to leave. You were right to choose your dreams. And the world is better because you did. I hope you find this letter someday when you're not too busy making history to read it. And I hope you know that somewhere in Connecticut, a man who failed you is finally understanding what he lost. Bradley, I read the letter once, then folded it and put it in a drawer. I didn't need his acknowledgement. I didn't need his apology. I had needed those things once, desperately, in the years when I was shrinking myself to fit his expectations. But I had outgrown that need the same way I had outgrown him. What I needed now was to keep working. To plan the next mission, and the one after that. To build the future I had dreamed about since I was a child lying in the New Mexico desert, counting stars with my father. The Prometheus astronauts returned to Earth 6 months later. I was in mission control for the landing, just as I had been for the launch, watching the capsule descend through the atmosphere, holding my breath until the parachutes deployed and the spacecraft splashed safely into the Pacific. At the welcome ceremony. Commander Sarah Okonkwo, the first woman to walk on Mars, gave a speech that I will never forget. None of us would be here without Dr. Amelia Cross, she said, gesturing toward me in the audience. She believed in this mission when others doubted. She solved problems that seemed unsolvable. She held us together across 140 million miles of space with nothing but her voice and her faith. Sarah paused, her eyes meeting mine. Dr. Cross, you once told me that the universe is too big for small dreams. You were right. And you proved it to the entire world. I thought about my father, about that letter he had written before he died. I looked up at the California sky, too bright with afternoon sun to show any stars, and I waved anyway. I see you, Papa, I whispered. I made it. My ex-husband once told his friends I wasn't smart enough for NASA. He said it was adorable that I dreamed of sending rockets to Mars. 7 years later, I directed the first human landing on another planet. I made history. I proved that dreams don't have expiration dates, that intelligence can't be diminished by mockery, that the only person who gets to decide what you're capable of is you. Bradley Montgomery is still in Connecticut, still working at his father's firm, still married to his second wife. I heard they have a nice house, a comfortable life, a very realistic existence. I have Mars, and if I had to choose again, between the security of his approval and the uncertainty of my own ambitions, I would choose the stars every single time. Because my father was right, the universe is too big for small dreams, and I was never meant to be small.